Namaskar. This is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. Just as a nation needs sound corporate and business laws for the management, control and supervision of business entities, so is the need for a robust bankruptcy code to deal with failed and bankrupt entities in an economy. That's because all bankrupt entities need not be liquidated, and those entities which are viable and which are without management frauds, they must be supported, they must be protected, and they must be revived if that's possible. Unlike India, whose bankruptcy code came only in 2016, the developed nations like USA have had a bankruptcy code in place since many decades. In fact, the first bankruptcy code in USA was enacted in the year 1800, and after several repeals and after several revisions from time to time, its present bankruptcy code was formulated in 1978. That explains why the US has one of the most advanced and time-tested bankruptcy codes, such that tens of thousands of individual, non-corporate and corporate bankruptcies are filed and resolved in America every year. Under its bankruptcy code, the two main options available to a bankrupt business entity or a bankrupt sole proprietor for that matter are either save the entity through restructuring and reorganizing of its debt which has not been able to pay. And if that is not possible, that is, restructuring and reorganization is not possible, then liquidate the company as a second alternate. If an entity is viable and can be revived despite its bankruptcy, then it is referred under what is popularly known as a Chapter 11 bankruptcy in America. In such a case, the business of the entity continues under the supervision of the court, of course. A reorganization and restructuring plan is then prepared for the Chapter 11 entity, under which the entity, the bankrupt entity, now gets protection from litigation and coercive recovery. It gets write-offs from the lenders, and new lenders are now permitted to come in with a first charge, a first priority on the entity's cash flows. If the lenders and creditors accept such a plan and the courts also approve it, then the entity's debt gets pruned, it gets reorganized, and if all goes well, then the bankrupt entity emerges now profitable, now stronger, and hopefully it survives also. That's a case of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. If such Chapter 11 plan is not feasible or accepted, then the entity goes into Chapter 7 liquidation, in which case the business ceases operations and a court-appointed trustee now sells its assets and distributes the proceeds to the lenders and to the creditors. And if there is a surplus, if any, after such distribution, then it goes to the entity's owners. If there is no surplus, they get nothing. This Chapter 11 reorganization of business has often been misused by dubious and questionable entrepreneurs in America who strike deals and write-offs with the lenders after showing losses and bankrupting their own companies. That's just what Donald Trump did on several occasions, as per his own admission that he has made to the press. Between 1991 to 2009, his hotels and casino companies filed for bankruptcy on 6 occasions due to their inability to meet the required payments to the lenders and to the creditors. Surprisingly, despite his first corporate bankruptcy in 1991 itself, the lenders did not stop lending to his other companies, which also later went bankrupt. Trump thus boasted to the Newsweek magazine in 2011 that I do play with bankruptcy laws, he says. He says that they are very good for me. According to him, he has used the laws of this country to pare debt. He said, we will have the company, we will throw it into a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, we will negotiate with the banks, we will make a fantastic deal with the banks. According to him, it's just business. That's what he told the Newsweek in 2011. Even in 2019, when he was the American president, he defended his several corporate bankruptcies, claiming that it was because of the entitlement of massive write-offs and depreciation which the American real estate developers and entities were entitled to in the 1980s and 1990s, that his entities, he says, showed losses for tax purposes and thus negotiated with the lenders through bankruptcy proceedings. That sounds too scammy to us. Keeping aside the shady transactions of Donald Trump, which apparently planned blatant bankruptcies according to his own admission in order to take the lenders for a ride, of course, the fact is that every year, thousands of Americans and their entities do go bankrupt. The pandemic certainly has made it worse there, and the number of corporate bankruptcies at about 640 in 2020 were at a decade high in America. A number of very well-known companies like JCPenney, which happens to be its oldest retailers, luxury retailers like Neiman Marcus, companies like J. Crew, clothing companies like Brooks Brothers, Tailored Brands, Pier 1 Imports, the car company Hertz, 24-Hour Fitness, the gym company, Diamond Offshore, the energy company, and Quorum Health, etc., they all went bankrupt last year. Such bankruptcies continue there in 2021, particularly in sectors which have been impacted the most by COVID. And those sectors include retail, leisure, hospitality, education, travel, auto, energy, and these related ones. Interestingly, the data there says that the maximum bankruptcies in America between 2004 to 2021 were in the sectors of finance, services, which consist of the likes of small restaurants, bars, salons, etc., retail trade, construction, and transportation. These were the biggest bankruptcies or the sectors that saw it there. Let's talk about the Indian scenario, where the bankruptcy code is of recent origin and it is yet to find its feet according to us. The IBC in India is meant to be a one-stop shop for resolving bankruptcies in a time-bound manner. In general terms, the bankruptcy process under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, which is the IBC, may be triggered off either by the debtor or by the creditor whenever a payment default is made by a company. The directors of the company are then suspended and the creditors take charge of the company by appointing a resolution professional. A resolution plan is then formulated under the approval of the committee of creditors consisting of the lenders, and if finally that plan is approved by the NCLT, then the bankruptcy case gets resolved under the IBC. This is the general format. If the matter cannot be resolved within the mandatory time limit set by the IBC, then the company, of course, goes into liquidation. The most prominent feature of bankruptcy resolutions in India so far, which has raised a hue and cry, has been the huge loan write-offs by the lenders. And if the likes of Donald Trump have taken advantage of bankruptcy laws in the USA, then so have the promoters of companies like Jet Airways, Alok Industries, Siva Industries, Videocon, etc. have done that. And they have had their huge loans settled by taking stunning haircuts up to 95%. The same Donald Trump formula perhaps has been applied here in a much bigger way. Write-offs by the lenders under the IBC. These massive haircuts and write-off deals have often been truly facilitated under the IBC by eager and corrupt bankers who have been keen to avoid their own personal accountability and prosecution. But as far as the bankrupt promoters are concerned, their companies have benefited immensely. As per a recent Indian report, unlike in the US, where the top sectors of bankrupt companies have been finance, services, and the retail trade, in India, 71% of bankruptcies under the IBC have been from the manufacturing, real estate, and construction sectors. This trend is likely to change, in our opinion, after the COVID ends in India and bankrupt companies emerge from sectors affected the most by the COVID pandemic, which is companies in sectors like hotels, entertainment, education, travel, tourism, transport, mall operators, retailers, and of course, the MSME entities. The larger picture and the ground reality is that with over 70% of bankruptcy in India between 2016 to 2021 being from just three sectors, which is manufacturing, construction, and real estate, all of which happen to be big job and GDP generators for the economy, it shows to us the pathetic state of affairs in these critical sectors which is manufacturing, construction, and real estate, which have triggered corporate failures in a large way. And the reasons for the bankruptcies in these vital sectors have been many according to us. Let's discuss them. The first reason has to do with the government itself. The faulty government policies, sudden policy changes, and delays in payments to the vendors and suppliers by the government, as we have seen in sectors of power, telecom, infrastructure, and coal mining in particular, has been a prime reason for the bankruptcy and failure of companies. The second reason, the continued economic slowdown between 2016 to 2021 in India has substantially weakened these sectors, which is manufacturing, construction, and real estate, and has made them bankrupt. The third one, over-leveraged and window-dressed balance sheets of companies with unsustainable loads of debt, which were not sustainable and were bound to collapse, as we have seen in the case of numerous construction companies. Cyclical downturns as seen in steel, metals, and real estate sectors since 2012 has been another reason for bankruptcies in these sectors. Poor ease of doing business at the ground level due to onerous and multiple laws, due to difficult and expensive compliance, due to corruption, and because of delays in enforcing contracts in courts have made many entities unprofitable, unviable, and bankrupt. A missing culture of takeovers and mergers of struggling but viable entities such that they get rescued because of mergers and takeovers before they become bankrupt has been the other reason why we have seen these kind of bankruptcies in these sectors. The fact is that this bankruptcy data does not capture the rampant bankruptcies in India in sectors like informal, unorganized, and the small sector, which have been outside the IBC of present. And it also does not capture data of banks, where 14 bankrupt public sector banks were rescued by the government through recapitalization and under the PCA of the RBI. Or else, if this data had been captured, which is bankruptcies related to the small sector, the service sector, and of the banks, then, like in the case of US, the finance sector would have been the number one bankrupt sector in India, led by the likes of ILFS, DHFL, public sector banks, PMC Bank, Yes Bank, etc. And like in the case of US, even the services sector, consisting of small service providers in the informal, in the organized, in the unorganized, and in the MSME sector, would have been the second prominent sector of bankruptcies in India. The pattern seems to be the same, except that data in India has not captured the bankruptcies in the banking and finance sector and also in the informal sector, which has been outside the purview of IBC at present. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.